Hello and welcome. As a result of events and reboots, the chronology of all Marvel titles is a mess. For a new reader, or someone who actually collects physical comics, it is difficult to follow a title from one transition to another. To collect a run, it requires some detective work to chart the changes to a series. The legacy numbering helps, but it's still a mess. Luckily, one title I've followed for decades is the Fantastic Four. I've seen its ups and its downs, its changes and its resets for many years. That said, even I need a chart to keep track of its publishing history. So that's what this video is, a visual chronology of the Fantastic Four from 1961 to the present day. I'll briefly mention some highlights and defining moments for the series. I'm reserving more in-depth videos looking at specific periods for a later time. For the record, this only looks at the main title, not the annuals or various spin-offs. Got it? Excellent. Let's begin. Hi, this is Alan, the voice of Strange Brain Parts. Sorry for the interruption, but I'll be brief. Please subscribe and support this channel on Patreon. Links are down below. Thank you. Now back to the video. It's possible to roughly break this original run into 4 distinct eras that conform to the decade they were published. The 60s were the classic Stan Lee and Jack Kirby run. For almost a decade, they assembled an extensive cast, rounded out the characters, and created the blueprint everyone would follow and refine for decades to come. For established fans, this is essential reading. However, for a more modern audience, its quaint 60s dialogue and situations might not be all that appealing. Most cite the period between 1965 and 1967 as being peak Lee and Kirby. This saw the introduction of the Inhumans, Silver Surfer, Galactus, and Black Panther, among others. It's generally accepted this highly creative period came to an end with issue 67, which introduced Adam Warlock. Reportedly, Kirby was disappointed with how Lee's dialogue changed the intent of what he plotted. After that, Kirby didn't create any new characters. Instead, the series relied on the numerous characters already established. The next era would be the 70s. After Kirby left, the series was primarily handled by Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas. I consider these the wilderness years. Conway seemed to do his best to ensure Sue wasn't part of the team, and there was a lot of discord in the family. Thomas tried to recapture the spirit of the first family, with mixed results. The 80s are practically defined by John Byrne's lengthy run. There were other creative teams before him, but it's Byrne's run that stands out. The trial of Reed Richards, and Sue finally being recognized as the Invisible Woman, as opposed to being the Invisible Girl, being 2 examples. But then there's Malice, so... After Byrne, and until the end of the series, Tom DeFalco mainly guided the series. This is best described as a pretty rough time for the team. It went through numerous extreme 90s changes to remain relevant. The cancellation was a mixed blessing. It stopped the decline of the title that launched Marvel, which was good, but it also signaled the end of an era. The team had weathered over 30 years of change, but it couldn't survive the current climate in the Marvel offices. It was sacrificed to generate interest and raise stock prices. The series came to an end due to Onslaught, a crossover event that killed off a number of heroes. This was Marvel's attempt at wiping the past clean and rebooting their characters with new, updated origins. Basically, it was a mess. Marvel reportedly hired Jim Lee for $1 million to reboot the Fantastic Four following the Onslaught event. Traditionally, this title, among others, was known as Heroes Reborn. Lee and his writing partner, Brandon Choi, updated the team's origin to more modern times and began to reintroduce all the classic villains and supporting cast. Lee penciled the first 6 issues, and then a revolving door of artists took over after him. It was basically a greatest hits package with a slick modern update. Lee stayed on the title for the contractually obligated 12 issues before leaving and returning to Image. 1 issue followed his departure, and this title came to an abrupt, merciful end, as did the entire Heroes Reborn experiment. With Heroes Reborn being an expensive failure, the Fantastic Four was rebooted with the original lineup, and no sign that Onslaught ever happened. The series limped along until Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo took over. This gave contemporary readers an entry point into the series. The creative team revitalized the title, and for the first time in years, the Fantastic Four seemed to recapture its former glory, while also feeling modern. The final part of the unthinkable story saw the comic return to its original numbering. Taking into account the two prior series, the title restarted with issue 500. When Waid and Wieringo left, J. Michael Straczynski would follow. This was an awkward period, interrupted by numerous crossovers. The series seemed to stop and start, never really finding its footing. Mark Millar and Brian Hitch would follow, and the title seemed to stabilize. While restrained, Millar does his best to turn the team into a tabloid version of itself. This leads to the best interpretation of the team done by Jonathan Hickman. Millar and Hitch do establish some elements that are used by Hickman, but in my opinion, it's not entirely necessary to read them beforehand. Hickman fills you in along the way. The series continued until the death of Johnny Storm in issue 588. Faced with that loss, the team doesn't officially disband, but they do change to recognize they are no longer the same team. Officially, Spider-Man joins and takes Johnny's place. They also adopt all-white costumes. The FF stands for the Future Foundation, the think tank set up by Reed Richards to inspire the next generation. For the first 11 issues, it's a regular Fantastic Four comic featuring the core team. Afterwards, it would be dedicated exclusively to the children of the Foundation. While I enjoy Hickman's run overall, this is the most annoying portion of the team's history. In fact, even after the main title restarts, you need to continue with the series for a few months to get the complete picture. From what I've seen, collections don't assemble both titles into a coherent reading order. So for a few months, until the FF becomes an autonomous title, you have to flip back and forth between the two to get the entire story. Hickman's final issue became the ending of the original series once again. At this time in Marvel's history, the company seemed to have an unwritten policy of canceling a title then rebooting it with each new creative team. This is the fate of the series for the next few years. There are constant reboots. This is the short-lived Matt Fraction and Mark Bagley run. This is the equally short James Robinson run. Both runs are competent, but they have a hard time capturing the magic of Hickman's pivotal run. As ridiculous as it sounds, during the Robinson run, the original numbering was started once again for exactly 4 issues. Then the series was cancelled. This was a proper cancellation, and the result of Marvel executives having a hissy fit. At this point, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a thing, a big thing. Not only was Marvel Studios producing multiple pictures per year, but everyone who held the rights to Marvel properties were greenlighting movies. This included the much-maligned Fan 4-Stick movie from 2015. In response to having no input into that production, Marvel canceled the Fantastic Four out of sheer corporate pettiness. There's a whole essay to be written about this period, but that's a story for another time. All that needs to be reiterated is the title was canceled due to corporate politics and a desire for Marvel to distance itself from a product they didn't endorse. Three years later, after the stink of the Fan 4-Stick movie faded, the team was resurrected once again. This run, almost entirely written by Dan Slott, takes into account the end of the crossover event, Secret Wars. So it's a bit of a reset point, and in my opinion, the beginning of the Fantastic Four in the modern age. To date, the series has been entirely written by Ryan North. It's a decent continuation that definitely tries to appeal to a new, younger audience. For new readers, finding an entry point might be difficult, especially considering the number of times it's been rebooted. I would suggest those interested begin with the Mark Waid run. The reason is simple. It begins with a brief introduction to their origin, and then quickly moves on to their ongoing adventures. It also has a little bit of everything. It's fun, sometimes dramatic, and the team dynamic works. It's easy to understand why these people stay together as a family. From there, I'd suggest skipping forward to the Jonathan Hickman run and seeing the team at their best. This might be a fine place for those familiar with the Fantastic Four to begin, but I wouldn't suggest it for brand new readers, because it presumes you know the characters and at least some of the past challenges they've faced. The Dan Slott run is also a good place for someone to begin, but only if they've read Secret Wars first, because the series begins after that event and it explains why Reed, Sue, and the children are missing from the series. The most current series by Ryan North has a similar problem. It begins with the team split up and they're having solo adventures due to prior events. It takes some time before they reassemble and become whole again. That said, it's not difficult to understand, nor is it confusing. In fact, I found it rather basic and a few steps back in complexity. It's Fantastic Four light, I guess you could say, which appears to be Marvel's overall direction in recent times. Their material is tamed down, a bit generic, and seems to reflect the tone and easy-to-follow plots of the movies branded by Marvel Studio. To quote Douglas Adams, it's mostly harmless. So to summarize, for new readers, start with the Wade and Wieringo run. It feels modern, and it's a good entry point for readers curious about the team. The Slott or North runs would be fine beginning points too, but neither would be my first choice, because they both begin with the team split apart. Thank you for watching. Thanks to all my fine supporters on Patreon and YouTube. Your ongoing support makes it possible for this channel to continue. I appreciate every single one of you. Please subscribe if you've not already. Leave a comment and a like. I try to keep ads and self-promotional bits like this to a minimum, so if you can, consider directly supporting this channel on Patreon. Extra special thanks to Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sickin, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrew, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gaunt, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You are all justified and ancient.